This day started like any other school day. The sun appeared over the horizon, filling the quiet town of Crestwood with warm light. Parents hurried to gather their children, ate a quick breakfast, and hung their backpacks on small chairs. It was a normal morning for the fifth graders at Crestwood Elementary School. Some of them grumbled about homework. Some laughed at the joke from yesterday, while others simply looked out the windows of the school bus, watching familiar roads rush past. None of them knew that in just a few hours they would be gone. All 27 children. One teacher disappeared, without warning, without signs of a struggle, without any evidence. The school day started normally. Everyone was there. Lessons began. But by lunchtime, the classroom was empty. The chairs were still neatly pushed under the desks. Several pencil cases stood open, and on one of the desks lay an unfinished game of tic-tac-toe, but there were no students or teacher, only silence. At first, people thought it might be a prank, a poorly planned excursion that was not recorded. But as minutes turned into hours and hours into days, panic set in. Search parties combed the entire city. Helicopters flew overhead. Divers surveyed nearby lakes and rivers. They knocked on every door. Every abandoned building was checked. All possible leads were checked, but there was nothing there. It seemed as if the entire class had disappeared from sight. The parents were shocked. Some refused to leave school, waiting, hoping that their child would suddenly appear again. Others searched on their own, refusing, but there were no answers. Over time, the story disappeared from the headlines. The city became a place of whispered legends and unanswered questions. Then, 27 years later, the desperate mother, who had never stopped searching for her son, noticed something. A detail so insignificant that it was so easy to miss that it went unnoticed for nearly 3 decades. And that's when everything changed. For 27 years, Margaret Holloway lived in a cycle of grief, hope, and disappointment. Her son Daniel was one of 27 children who went missing that day. He was 10 years old, full of life, and his laugh could light up the whole room. She still remembered the morning he disappeared, how he forgot his lunchbox and ran back into the house to get it, the way he waved to her before getting on the bus, how she spent the whole day without even suspecting that she was seeing him for the last time. To him, the past years have been harsh. The city changed, but Margaret never did. Some parents of missing children have left Crestwood, unable to bear the painful memories. Others stayed, but learned to live with the loss, convincing themselves that their children were gone forever. But Margaret couldn't give up. She searched like one possessed, following every clue, no matter how ridiculous it seemed. Some called her crazy. Others pitied her, but she didn't care. She needed answers. And then, one late evening, while rummaging through an old box of evidence she had been collecting for years, she saw it. Something so insignificant, so easy to brush aside, but it sent shivers down her spine. It was a school photo, taken just a few days before she disappeared. She had seen it hundreds of times, but now, in the dim light of the table lamp, she noticed something she had not noticed before. In the far right corner of the photo, almost out of frame, there was a shadow. A blurry, distorted figure standing directly behind the children. Her hand shook as she brought the photograph closer. It didn't sound like a teacher or any of the staff. The figure was somehow wrong. Too tall, too thin. The face was blurry, as if smeared. But it was there, watching. Margaret caught her breath. How did no one notice this before? She quickly looked through the rest of the items in the box, looking for anything that might be related to the strange figure. And then her heart stopped. Drawing, a simple child's sketch. This was found in Daniel's school desk after he went missing. At the time, she didn't pay any attention to it, thinking it was just another one of his drawings. But now it seemed like something much bigger. The picture showed a row of children drawn with jagged pencil lines, and behind them, just like in the photograph, the same dark figure loomed. Margaret's hands went cold. She had spent years chasing ghosts, hitting dead ends, begging authorities to reopen the investigation. But now, for the first time in nearly 3 decades, she sensed something new. A clue. She needed to know what it was, who it was, but she wasn't the only one still watching what was happening. Margaret's heart pounded as she clutched the drawing. The coincidence was impossible to ignore. Did Daniel see anything before he disappeared? Did he try to tell her? She ran her trembling fingers over the jagged outlines of the dark figure. If this thing, whatever it was here before the kids disappeared, then maybe, just maybe, it was the key to everything. She needed help. She extended her hand towards him. Tom Wren, a retired detective who once led the investigation into the missing class case. He was the only officer who seemed to care, the only one who treated the parents with compassion rather than empty words. But after many years of hopeless situations, even he gave in. When Margaret called, his voice was heavy with fatigue. Question. Margaret, it's been 27 years already, he said. There is nothing more to look for. She hesitated before speaking. I found something, she said. Something we missed. There was a long silence. Then, finally, he sighed. Without wasting any time, she entered his small, cluttered house and laid out the old photograph and drawing on the kitchen table. Tom leaned over, adjusting his glasses. His tired eyes widened slightly as he saw the dark figure. Strange, he muttered. I don't remember seeing this before. She watched as he turned the photograph over, looking for the date. Then, almost absent-mindedly, he reached for a stack of old case files on a nearby shelf. He pulled out a tattered folder and opened it, revealing several reports and witness statements obtained during the initial investigation. Quickly flipped through them, but then his hands froze. A photograph of another class, another group of children, another school, and in the background is the same dark figure. Margaret felt the air leave her lungs. This is impossible. Tom didn't answer. His face turned pale. He slowly pulled out the other reports. Missing child cases decades before Crestwood. Each photograph, barely visible at the edges, depicted the same figure. This isn't just Crestwood, Tom whispered. This had happened before. Margaret's fingers dug into the table. Then why? Why didn't anyone notice this? Nobody was looking for this, he muttered. Still, a cold shiver ran down her spine. This was not just a local tragedy. It was something more ancient, deeper, something that had been going on for longer than anyone could have imagined. But why? Tom looked through the folders and stopped at an old newspaper clipping from the 1950s. He frowned. Only one survived, he muttered. Margaret caught her breath. Who? He turned the newspaper towards her. The article was accompanied by a black-and-white image of a frail-looking elderly man. Henry Calloway, Tom read aloud. He was the only child who returned. Margaret's pulse quickened. If someone was able to return, they must have known something. Where is he now? Tom clenched his jaw. He said he was still in town, but there was a reason no one was talking to him. Henry Calloway lived on the outskirts of Crestwood, in a dilapidated house hidden behind overgrown trees. He was a recluse, rarely seen in town, but when Margaret and Tom knocked on his door, he opened it almost immediately, as if he had been expecting them. His eyes, clouded with age, slid over them before settling on the photograph in Margaret's hands. Figure in the shadows. Margaret said, "You saw it." Henry's face darkened. "You shouldn't have come here. Please," she begged. "I need to know what happened." He hesitated for a moment. Then, with a deep, tired sigh, he stepped aside and let them in. His home was littered with old newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, and faded photographs, each linked to missing children over the years. "All this is not enough," Henry finally said in a hoarse voice. Margaret swallowed, but it was enough to make them forget about her. What is this? Henry shook his head. Not a man, not a ghost. Everything is much more ancient. It's waiting. Watch, and when the time comes, it takes them somewhere else. Where? Volume? Henry's expression was grim. Nobody knows. Margaret clenched her fists. Then how did you come back? For the first time, Henry looked truly scared. I never went anywhere, he whispered. I hid. I stayed while the others, they were taken away. I don't know where. I don't know why. But I know this. Once a person is marked, he is never forgotten. A heavy silence fell over the room. Margaret felt sick. Her son was marked, like all children. Then Henry said something that made her blood run cold. It's still here. Margaret and Tom exchanged glances. The air in the room became heavier, filled with something invisible. Then, as if on cue, the light flickered and a shadow flashed outside the window. Margaret caught her breath. Tom instinctively reached for his gun, but Henry only shook his head. Bullets won't stop him. Margaret's thoughts were racing. If whatever had taken Daniel was still out there, if it had been watching us all these years, was it still hunting?